I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
Well, Duluth has a new police chief and a new fire chief. Tonight we'll meet Duluth's incoming public safety leadership team and hear about their priorities going forward.
The Skybowl fire burned through nearly 1,000 acres east of Hoyt Lakes. Now that fire is under control. But what does the fire danger look like going into the rest of this spring, especially with the Minnesota fishing opener this weekend?
And we'll also have the week's business headlines and a news file story from 25 years ago.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. Tonight has been a big week for wildfires up north, although the recent cool and rainy weather has certainly helped get those fires under control, Julie.
The cool is good for something.
Yeah, it did work out in our favor this week, that's for sure. Okay, some great topics tonight.
All right. Thank you, Denny, and welcome everyone. Mayor Emily Larson appointed Mike Tusken as Duluth's police chief on Wednesday of last week, and 2 days later, she named Dennis Edwards as the city's fire chief. We're pleased to welcome Duluth's new public safety leadership team to Almanac North tonight. Mike Tusken is a 24-year veteran of the Duluth Police Department, and Dennis Edwards has been with the Duluth Fire Department for 20 years. And congratulations to both of you for being here.
Thank you, Julie.
Appreciate it. Pretty intensive interview process, it sounds like. In fact, I think that Dennis and I are the only two people that you haven't talked to before you got the job.
Before tonight.
So we thought we'd invite you in. Were you surprised by how many people were engaged in that selection process for you?
I think that the process really added legitimacy to the selection with the police chief position. The community is such an important part of the police chief's job, and so it didn't surprise me so much that we had so many interviews.
Yeah.
We had to interview with our unions and with other directors, the community forum, but it was all so that everyone had an opportunity to ask questions about and understand what the police chief was going to do for the community.
Maybe we can ask the two of you, starting with you, Chief Edwards, a little bit about yourself. You're from Duluth, or where you're I think you're from Wisconsin, are you not?
Yeah, I grew up south of Superior, went to high school in Superior, started my career at Superior Fire Department for 5 years, which included a year-long exchange in Australia. And in 1996, I came over to Duluth, so last Friday was my 20-year anniversary.
Wonderful. And Chief Tusken, you're Duluthian by birth and went to school here?
Yep. I grew up in Morgan Park and went to Denfeld High School and been on the police department now for 24 years. And so, a lot of time here in Duluth.
Well, having all that time in Duluth, growing up here and professionally on the force, have you seen the crime landscape change in Duluth over that time?
Oh, well, absolutely. When I started 24 years ago, there were some periods of time over night shift where you'd have a reprieve in the action and things that at 1 and 2 in the morning would calm down. And really now we see that our officers go, doesn't matter if it's day shift or night shift, pretty much all throughout the night. So we're much busier. When I started, we had under 50,000 calls for service, and this last year we had 104,000 calls for service. So very active, very busy, and we do that with a staff of 155 sworn officers.
Chief Edwards, do you have any priorities you'd like to see for the fire department here in the city?
Well, our number one priority will always be our response to our customers, doing our emergency response, and then all of our other tasks that we do that are not emergency, life safety division tasks like rental housing inspection and, fire inspections and such. So that will always be our priority and kind of drive our mission. But I'm looking at some other things also. We've had good relationships with our other responding agencies around us, but now we're going to use what we have to build on and to make better relationships and do more collaborative decision making.
Do you see any merging of fire halls in the city, or at least for now, you're going to keep what we have?
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at merging or closing. We're looking at strengthening and being better. Like Mike said, their calls for service have gone way up, and so have ours, and we don't see the trend changing from increasing every year.
Having two new people in these key public safety leadership positions right now, is this a good opportunity for some of those collaborations maybe that you talked about for new ideas to come forward from the two of you?
I think so. I mean, Mike and I have had a lot of respect for each other, starting on the street together, being at the same calls, and now both in this leadership role, and we've had a lot of good conversations, and we have a lot of close mutual friends, and I think we'll do well with both of our staffs to have those conversations.
Yeah. Mike, there's a citizen patrol group here in the city of Duluth. Can you talk a little bit about that? What do they do?
Well, Citizens Patrol is really the eyes and ears for the police department. Our citizen patrols are engaged residents that are looking for opportunities to keep their neighborhoods safe. Really the most effective policing that happens in our city is when we have an engaged citizens that will let us know. Nobody knows their neighborhood better than the people who live there. And so the idea of a citizens patrol is to keep your eyes and ears open and report suspicious activity to the police.
So are they regularly patrolling their neighborhoods?
Regularly patrolling their neighborhoods. It's obviously voluntary. They do it as time avails, but they're very engaged, very passionate about their work. And we love it because we get extra information that we would otherwise never get.
So you plan to keep that program going?
Without question, it's very successful.
The heroin issue in Duluth was a big topic during the recent mayor's race.
Right.
How big an issue is it from your perspective as the new police chief, and what do you see needs to be done to address it?
Well, the heroin is a unique drug in as much as a single dose can kill you. So it's obviously very serious. We all know that we have relatives and friends that have addiction issues. And these addictions, especially to heroin, can certainly be lethal. So what we really can control is, I put an extra person on when I became interim chief so that we can impact source of supply. If we can stop the drugs to getting to people, we have a chance of saving a life. And the other initiatives that we've done is every officer now has Narcan, which is an antidote to anyone who overdoses that will reverse the effects and save a life. So all of our officers just in the last 2 weeks have been trained now to administer the antidote Narcan.
Chief Edwards, does the fire department get involved in that too? Have you noticed more of a drug issue as you go out to calls as first responders too?
Absolutely. I mean, we are going to those same calls, and as far as the police department carrying the Narcan, now that might get administered a little bit faster because a lot of times the police squads can get on scene before the fire EMS unit, and then we can do the rest of the support for the EMS after that, and then usually working with Gold Cross Ambulance, obviously, because they're the transport ALS. But one thing that I've noticed and heard from our crews that are out there is one thing that we're seeing that we didn't see years ago were multiple patients at these calls. So, the more people that we have trained to help these people, the better, because sometimes we'll have 2, 3, 4 patients all at once.
Mike, how are body cameras working out?
Fantastic. We will see the proliferation of body cameras in every police department in this country, I think, in the next few years. They're expensive. It's expensive technology, but that transparency, that ability for us to see our officers in action, we can use it as a training tool. We can use it as a transparency tool to show the public. They have tremendous upsides. And we just, our officers who were reticent to wear them initially are really believers in it because
the fear is gone.
Yeah, the fear is gone, and we see best evidence practices.
Sure.
It's all on video now.
Yeah. You've been doing a lot of recruiting the police department has here over the years. You just recently again put some new officers on. What's the size of the staff in Duluth?
We have 155 sworn officers today.
And fire department side, how many officers do you have, or how many firefighters do you have?
It's about 134.
Okay.
In those recruitment efforts for both of your departments, is there a real concerted effort right now to try to balance out the racial inequities?
Absolutely. So for the Duluth PD, we almost exactly mirror the racial demographics of Duluth. Almost exactly. But we really need to continue to bring in more females. And I don't think it's okay to just be what the average is. I think we should actually be exaggerated a little bit and be a little bit broader than that. There are community meetings I go to with people of color who talk about the importance of seeing people who look like them who represent the police department. And so we will continue to look at our universities here in Duluth for students and people of color, and we're going to start doing a mentorship program. We also like to do the same thing with getting more females.
How do you disperse patrol officers throughout the city? Are there assignments that each of them have that they follow day by day?
There is. We have 6 policing districts, and in each one of those districts we assign either 1 or 2 officers, up to 3 officers in some. And so, yeah, they have areas of responsibility, and within those areas of responsibility, they respond to calls, and they're also responsible for doing community outreach.
And capable of leaving that district should help you.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. If a big event happens, everyone can go to that event if need be.
Now people hear, police chief, fire chief, sounds like a pretty glamorous position, but sounds like you were out doing some not so glamorous work this week, scrubbing graffiti. I think we have a picture of you out there doing it.
Yeah, we worked a long day. Started at 8 and we weren't done till 4:30 or so, and we were out putting the elephant's knot,
Looks
which
like
is
you
the
there.
product, putting it on the bridges and the rocks and everywhere else. But it was a great relationship building exercise. I got to ride around with a police sergeant who I've seen on the street but hadn't really known before today or yesterday, and now we're going to go fishing together.
Sounds like your department, so historically they'll have had good working relationships.
Yes.
Here.
I think so, yes.
Yep.
All right, well,
Good.
Gentlemen, congratulations on your new positions. Good luck as you head out there on the streets, and thank you for coming in and talking with us tonight.
Thank you, Julie.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. All the best.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
Yeah, okay.
Which one do you like the best?
For walleyes?
The day before Minnesota's fishing opener is almost as much fun as the opener. It's a time for gearing up, baiting up, and paying up. But the talk of the day is, of course, strategy, and everyone's got their own theory on how to slay the walleyes.
I think it's going to be leeches to start with, and they're going to be really deep. So you might want to jig for them, would be my theory anyway.
Phil Mercer's been waiting anxiously for 2 months to get his 14-footer loaded up. He says his game plan on the lake could change at any time.
Also, it could be night crawlers, so you could go either way and possibly catch some nice ones. Different lakes vary,
Other anglers say the key to filling the stringer is being in the right place at the right time.
I think they're going to be in the shallow water yet because the water's still real cold. And they'll probably be on the north ends of the lakes because that warms up a little faster.
And some will try anything that works.
Yeah, maybe just cover as much water as you possibly can and try everything possible, try a lot of different techniques.
So it seems there are as many schools of thought as there are schools of fish. Whether it's minnows, rapalas, or jigs, there's no sure thing. And that's a tough lesson that thousands of anglers are bound to learn over and over again. Ryan Davenport, KDLH News.
The Skybowl wildfire is the biggest in Minnesota so far this year, consuming nearly 1,000 acres east of Hoyt Lakes. Fire danger remains high in the region, just as anglers are heading out for Minnesota's fishing opener. Here with an update on how firefighting efforts are wrapping up at the Skybo Fire is Kris Reichenbach, Public Affairs Officer for the Superior National Forest. And Dan Miller is Science and Operations Officer for the National Weather Service in Duluth to talk about how the forecast models are shaping up for the spring fire season. Thank you both for being here. So Kris, what's new? Is the Skybo Fire done? Are you now out of the area?
Well, it's not totally done, Dennis. We still have crews on the fire. There was a what we call a Type 2 state of Minnesota team that was managing the fire when it was really active. They have it nearly 100% contained, and so then yesterday the Type 2 team transitioned out, and then they transferred the management over to a local, we call them a Type 4 team, and these are our local district folks.
So was that considered a serious fire that had even far greater potential?
Well, you know, serious, some people were evacuated. That's for safety measures, to just get them out of the way and then allow the teams, the crews to get in there and work. So anytime that there are people or property threatened, that's definitely serious to us. And that's
that was
always
the case there.
Yeah, and our first priority always is the safety of the public and the safety of our firefighters. So, yeah.
What are the fire conditions right now in our area?
In our area.
Yeah.
In the Arrowhead area, we're still in high fire danger. And I think a lot of people may be thinking that because we've had some cool weather, we've had just a little bit of precipitation, we really haven't had the kind of moisture, and we don't have the greening up yet that's really going to bring the fire danger down.
And Dan, it seems like up here in the Northland, we've been getting a lot of wind lately. This, I trust, could fan the flames. Where's all this wind coming from?
Well, during March, April, and May, those are some of the windier months of the year. It's the spring season. The atmosphere is highly energized during those transition seasons, and so, you know, it's actually fairly normal to have windy conditions in the spring and also again in the fall. And as many of our viewers might recall, here last week we could smell and see the haze from that huge wildfire up in Alberta. Not uncommon? Yeah, the Friday night, I was actually at the office, kind of, that was the first night of the Skybo fire, so I was there doing some initial response before the Type 2 team that Kris mentioned got spun up, and driving home that evening about 10:30 was kind of surreal because, you know, it looked foggy, but it wasn't. Right. It was smoke, and you know, a lot of people up here like fire pits, and they've smelled the smoke of burning wood before, and to me it was kind of surreal in another sense, in that to me there was a little bit of a twinge of electrical and plastic in there. You could actually smell that. Yeah, burning buildings up there. It's really kind of surreal to think that, you know, 48 hours ago that smoke was somebody's house in Fort McMurray, Canada. So a little bit of a sobering experience, especially for us people who do engage sometimes in the fire weather types of activities. Right. That, you know, it's really a reality check that, you know, this isn't just some trees out there that are burning. This is, a lot of times it gets into people's property and, you know, stuff that could be your stuff.
You mentioned that you were on site doing some initial response, and I think that might surprise people that folks from the Weather Service actually are out there on site working and partnering with.
Yeah, well, I was doing that stuff from the office, but we do have an incident meteorologist at our office in Duluth, and she was actually dispatched for most of this week up working with the Type 2 team on site up there. But yeah, you know, once a fire gets started, weather is one of the most critical things, because, you know, if nothing else, the wind direction and speed is going to be highly influencing how fast the fire will spread and in what direction it will spread. The kind of the complicating factor with the Skybo fire is that it sort of started along 6 or 7 different points along the railroad tracks, and so it wasn't just one point source. You had several different places along this 6-mile stretch where, you know, they were all concerned about where they're going to merge, where were they going to spread, and so yeah, the initial forecast that we do for, you know, those specific locations, the first responders are relying on that information very heavily.
Kris, how big a manpower force is there to fight wildfires up here?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I could give you a number, Dennis, but we've got people that are working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, with the state, with the Forest Service, counties, volunteer fire departments. When we get a big fire like, or an active fire like Skibo, we actually have people come from outside of the state, other, far across the country sometimes, to come and help us, which was the case last week.
At what point do you bring in air power, helicopters, aircraft?
That's really up to the people that are managing the fire, like the incident commander and the fire boss, to look at what's going to be the most effective way of suppressing and working on the fire. So it's always, it always depends on just
so
what
if
the
he or
conditions
she
are.
sees the need, they have the ability, the power to call in.
Yes, and actually we have resources that are on standby. We have aerial resources, helicopters and planes of different sizes and abilities that are on standby when we start getting into fire season. And when things start getting busy, we start moving them around to where they're strategically placed to help respond.
Has this been a fairly typical spring fire season so far?
Well, our definition of typical seems to be changing in the fire world. We were just talking about that a little bit, that some of our seasons seem to be coming on a little sooner, and we're seeing more intense fire maybe a little bit earlier. So if you look in past years, we've had fires large fires like the Ham Lake started the first week of May, and we still had ice on the lakes. Other seasons we've had large fires in April. So we're probably in the middle of our spring fire season, because every year in northern Minnesota we have a spring fire season and a fall fire season. It's when the conditions are just about right. We have dry fine fuels, and we don't have green up, and we don't have shade in the forest yet, and that's when things can dry out quickly.
You bring up a good point. Dan, the terrible fire of 1918 that burned around this region happened in the fall.
In October.
Could you bring your crystal ball out? What do we see for, we've had this in the spring. Can you forecast anything for fall yet or not?
I think it's less important to focus on the specifics of what the weather might be on any particular day. I think Kris kind of hit the nail on the head when she said, the two most critical times to be fire aware in our part of the world is between whenever the snow melts, whether that's mid-March or late April, and it's usually 4 to 8, maybe 10 weeks until green up, when things really get growing robustly enough and we start getting shade in the forest canopy where the fire risk starts to come down. Obviously how much rain we get during the spring also influences that a little bit, and we've had, after a very wet August to December, or August to February time period last year, we've been somewhat dry again this spring. And then the other time is, for me, it's always kind of when the ferns in the forest canopy start drying out and going dormant in September. And from then until when we get snow in the fall, any fire that can get, the reason for that, and Kris probably knows more about the individual little fuel things than I do, but just drive along a highway right now through the Minnesota Arrowhead, you have tons of dried out grasses that have been sitting there all winter, and they're dried out, and you get the same thing in the fall. And big fires like Pagami Creek, Ham Lake, Cavity Lake, they don't start like that. They start in those short-term fuels and then grow upscale when the weather conditions become favorable.
So Kris, this is the fishing opener in Minnesota. Lots of people are going to be out in the woods, on the lakes, probably wanting to have some campfires. Are there current restrictions that people need to know about, or tips that you can share to help make this a safe weekend?
Sure. We're happy to see people getting out and enjoying the woods and fishing, but we are asking people to be really careful. We don't, on the Superior National Forest, and I don't think anywhere up in our area, have restrictions on campfires going into this weekend. But we do really want to caution people to be especially careful when they're having their campfires or charcoal, even at home. Any kind of open fire where a spark could go off and start, because as Dan was saying, we have these fine fuels where a fire can start and spread really easily.
Kris, Dan, thank you so very much for this conversation.
Okay.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, now it's time for the week's business headlines from Business North. For service members returning to civilian life following deployment can be a difficult transition. Minnesota Power has taken steps to support military-connected employees, and on Tuesday, Minnesota Power was recognized as a Yellow Ribbon company. To earn this designation, companies must build relationships with local military leaders, identify which employees have military connections, and a commitment to hiring, supporting, and retaining veterans. The electric utility established a 10-person Yellow Ribbon Steering Committee in 2015 to develop an action plan. The campaign, which is overseen by the Minnesota Department of Military Affairs, now includes 50 Minnesota companies.
A Cloquet commercial site that had been a dry cleaning operation from 1966 to 1995 has been added to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's Superfund program. High levels of contamination have been found in groundwater samples on the property back in 2012. The site is located at number 12 2nd Street in Cloquet, right next to the gas station designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
C&S Design and Engineering of Ashland won a first-place national award for its design of the Blue Wave on the Bay commercial building on Chequamegon Bay. Stephen G. Schroffnagel, architect and president of C&S, was the project architect and construction manager. The award was presented by the Structural Insulated Panel Association. Blue Wave houses a coffee shop, upscale hotel rooms, and a sports store for waterfront activities. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
Well, if you have something to say to us about this week's show, give us a call. Dial 218-788-2849 and leave a message, or send an email to Almanac North at WDSE.org. You can also visit the WDSE website for updates on your favorite programs and get the latest news about the station and upcoming events. Well, it's been a busy day and certainly a lot going on in the region.
A lot going on this weekend. The Mail Carriers Food Drive is going on this weekend. You probably received one of those plastic bags in your mailbox. Just fill it up with non-perishable food items and hang it up. The Mail Carriers will pick it up tomorrow.
They will. For Julie and the crew here at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.